Hello and welcome to this website accessibility training for content managers at Augsburg. Let me start by saying that there is a website content manager Moodle website that's a resource that's available to you. You might have already found it if you're watching this video, but if you don't have access to it yet, you can contact the marketing office or your LFC to get access. On that site, there's an accessibility training section, and this Google Slides presentation that I'm using in this video is available there as website accessibility training slides. That's the link. If you have other questions about accessibility, things not related to the website or not part of the website, there might be PDF documents, Microsoft Word documents, questions about Moodle accessibility or other kinds of websites, audio-visual presentations, anything else, I would encourage you to go to your LFC first. If you have questions about course materials, the class office and CTL can be of assistance to you. If you're working with some kind of third-party software, something that marketing or IT don't manage, then you would probably need to go to that vendor directly to have accessibility concerns and questions addressed. Why does accessibility matter? The first thing to say is that it's the law. Website accessibility falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and higher ed has been especially targeted for lawsuits in recent years. But of course, we're not doing these things just because it's the law. We're doing it because we care about being an inclusive university. We care about equity and hospitality. We want to make sure that anyone who is coming to our website can access the information that's there, and that we're not intentionally or unintentionally excluding anyone from accessing that content. And in the end, website accessibility is something that helps everyone. The accessibility tools, such as screen readers that exist, depend on web standards in order to function. But these web standards are the same things that all sorts of web browsers and technologies depend on in order to interpret websites correctly. So if we build the website the right way, then all of the technologies that we all use work properly, and people can interact with the web page in the best possible way. Here's the overview of what we'll be talking about. We'll start with custom code, move into issues with text, then issues with images, and finally issues with audio and video. This is an example of custom code. This is our first issue. Avoid adding CSS or inline style code to your web page. The first is an example of inline style code. This is where you have an HTML element, in this case a paragraph element, and there's a style attribute that provides some color information. The second example is of CSS, and this is where you put a style tag on the page, and then you put CSS information within that style tag. Avoid doing either of these things on the website. The reason for that is changing those default web page styles can cause accessibility problems, it can violate Augsburg's brand standards, and it can cause dramatic errors in web page display. The important thing is to not be doing any custom code on the page at all. And if you feel like you have some need for custom code, it's best that you contact the marketing office with those questions, because maybe there is a need that can be addressed with custom code, and we want to make sure that that is done in the best possible way so as to not cause any of these problems or errors that could occur if it's done otherwise. Now let's talk about text, starting with page titles. Page titles appear at the top of the page. This is a screenshot of the Department of Chemistry website and the degree requirements page, and that's the page title. This is a screenshot of the page editor for that page, and just showing that degree requirements is within the field that's specified for the page title. Page titles should describe the content of the page. They should use clear and direct language, and they should be brief. 1 to 4 words is a good rule of thumb. Here's an example. If I have a page that's about volunteer opportunities, I can simply call the page Volunteer Opportunities. I would want to avoid calling it something like Make a Difference, because Make a Difference is vague, and while I might make a difference in the process of volunteering, Make a Difference doesn't describe the content of the page. And it's important to keep this issue of clarity front and center, because clarity is what helps people find information, being clear and direct and succinct. Now we'll move on to headings. A page title is actually a kind of heading. So here is our Residence Life website, and the page title here is Ernest Hall, and on this page, further down, there's a heading that says Amenities Include. Here's the page editor for that page. Ernest Hall is up top in the page title area. Below that is the page editor. Right now, there's a drop-down box at the top of that page editor that says Heading 2. And that's because if you were to put your cursor or click on the Amenities Include line, that drop-down would show that that's a Heading 2. So that's a way that you can be absolutely certain as to whether something is a heading or not. Headings simply introduce the content that comes after them. Just like a page title will introduce the content of the whole page, a heading will introduce a portion of that content. So for headings, use clear and direct language. Also front-load keywords. This means to put the most important keywords, the most identifying words for that section at the front. And we'll get to more of those in a second. Also be brief. 1 to 5 words is a good rule of thumb. Headings are also part of have a hierarchy. So the page title is actually a heading 1, and that's why you won't see it as an option when you're adding headings to your own page. Heading 2 then is the top heading you'll use. It's just important to make sure that that you keep the hierarchy straight, which means if you have a heading 2, that creates a section, and then if you have subsections of that, you would use heading 3s for those subsections. Now, if those subsections have subsections, you'd have to use heading 4s for those. Hierarchies should generally not be that deep on a website, and in fact, if you're using heading 4s, because the hierarchy is that deep, you might want to consider taking another look at the content and seeing if there's a way you can simplify it. The important thing, though, is to keep that hierarchy straight. So, for example, don't use a heading 4 and then a subsection of that as a heading 2, because that would be reversing the hierarchy. Here's an example of a web page that makes a pretty good use of headings. This is the Minnesota Urban Debate League website, and it's their outcomes page. There are 3 headings on this page: evidence of program success, student academic performance, and benefits to school districts. All 3 of these are really good headlines. They accurately introduce the content that comes after them. They are succinct, 3 to 4 words, and they're using keywords. And by keywords, I just mean they're not using superfluous, unnecessary words that don't relate to the content. They're a good balance of being as short as possible while maintaining clarity and directness. A really common issue I see is bolded paragraph text being used as a substitute for a heading. So it's important to note that bolded paragraph text is not a substitute for a heading. Here's an example of that. This page has a heading at the top that says Online Registration Instructions. Below that, there are 3 sections, and what would appear to be 3 headings. And they are Before You Begin, Register for Courses, and View Your Course Schedule, Drop a Course, or Change Your Grading Option. That last one might be a little too long, might be worth revisiting, but the important note here is that these are not actually headings. If we go into the page editor, and if we were to click or put our cursor on the line Before You Begin, at the top it shows that the paragraph in the drop-down menu, the paragraph selection is made, which tells us that that's paragraph text and not heading, and then the bold icon is pressed in. So this is bold paragraph text. It's technically different from a heading. So these would need to be redone, removing the bold aspect to those headings and then making sure that one of the heading options is selected from that drop-down menu. The reason this is important is that screen readers can detect the headings that are on a page, and when someone goes to a heading or a page on a screen reader, the screen reader can read the headings to them, and then that person can jump to that section of the page. So that's really useful, but we also use them, visual users use them when they're scanning down a page. And so something that's clearly identified as a heading, styled as a heading, is meant to catch a person's eye, to have them notice, okay, this is a new section, and they can take a look at the heading and see if that's the section they want to go to. So here are some examples of page titles and headings, and we're going to see how we can improve them. These are some before and afters. Here's one example. What students and alumni say about our program. As a page title or a heading, that's pretty long. It's also unnecessarily long. In this case, we could use something like testimonials. Testimonials is a common word that's used for these sorts of things. And it would be fine, maybe after that heading, to say what students and alumni say about our program, have that be in regular paragraph text. But the heading, in order to be kind of short, succinct, but also clear and direct, testimonials is good. Here's another example. The Department of Communication Studies at Augsburg College. In this example, the first word is the word the. And as I mentioned, front-loading keywords is important for headings whenever possible. The word the is certainly not an important word. So we could get rid of that. It also says at Augsburg College. It's unnecessary to identify this being the Department of Communication Studies at Augsburg College because there's an assumption that if we're on the Augsburg College website, we're talking about Augsburg's Department of Communication and not some other college or university. So we can also get rid of that. That leaves us with Department of Communication Studies. That's a much better heading. If possible, it would be great to just say Communication Studies. Communication is actually the key word here because Department of could be anything. Could be Department of Physics, Department of Chemistry. So Department of is not very specific. Communication is really the key word. But either one of these substitutes would be fine. Here's another example. The 2016-2017 Financial Aid Instructions, Summer 2016 to Spring 2017. Very long. Again, it begins with the word the, which we'd want to get rid of. This is also repetitive. We have 2016 to 2017 happening twice in this heading. So what can we do to improve it? I would suggest changing it to Financial Aid Instructions 2016-2017. The financial aid instructions are the key words here. Like these are financial aid instructions, that's what they are. 2016-2017 is simply giving us more information on instructions for whom, and it's for people within that school year. Now, it might be okay to say financial aid instructions summer 2016 to spring 2017, because perhaps most people don't know that summer 2016 is actually part of the 2016 school year and not part of the previous school year. So maybe that's worth identifying in the heading. But if possible, I would go with the shorter heading with just the years. Here's another example. How to apply for financial aid at Augsburg. How to are unnecessary words. They're not keywords, and they don't help people find information. So we can get rid of those. At Augsburg is also unnecessary. If we're on the Augsburg College website, we're assuming that we're talking about Augsburg. So that just leaves us with apply for financial aid, and that works pretty well. Finally, learn more. What if we have that as a heading? Well, with this one, there might be a lot of possibilities. Learn more is very generic. It doesn't tell us really anything about what's going on next, except that there is apparently more text, but it doesn't tell us what that text is actually about. So if the text were to say something like, request information about applying to our program or something like that, then request information might be a more appropriate heading in that case. Of course, request information is not always going to be the heading that would replace a learn more heading. The point is, read the content that comes after that heading and then decide what is this text actually about and have a heading that accurately reflects that. Okay, let's move on to text links. A text link should be a self-contained unit. It should not rely on context in order to be understood, and it should indicate a link's destination. Here's an example, a bad example. Let's say we have 3 lines on the page, and let's create a scenario where this is this is an information sessions page on the MBA website. So we have some context. We know we're talking about the MBA program. We know we're talking about we're expecting something about information sessions about that program. So we find these 3 lines on the page, and it says March 10 session, register now, and the word register now is linked. In this case, the blue underlined text is what's linked. April 9th session, register now is the link. June 12th session, register now is the link. In this case, register now is the only text that's linked. And it's linked 3 times. So compare these with our criteria. A text link should be a self-contained unit. Well, in this case, register now only gives us some information. We know that we're registering for something, but we don't know which one. In fact, we have 3 things to register for. So the link doesn't tell us which thing we're registering for. So it doesn't, you have to read the text before it, which means it's not acting on its own. That also means it's relying on context to be understood. If I don't read the words March 10 session before I read register now, I won't know that that link is for the March 10 session. And the link should also indicate the destination clearly. In this case, it just doesn't. Register now doesn't tell us which session we're registering for. So test your links by reading them out loud outside of any context, and then ask yourself, am I reasonably sure what I will get if I click on this link? So if I go back to this example, if I were to just read these out loud, I would say, register now, register now, register now. And obviously it's unclear which one I should click on. Here's a screenshot of another web page. This web page has a list of organizations, and next to the name of the organization is the word website in blue, and that is what's linked, just the word website. Now, the reason I say that reading them out loud is helpful is that screen readers, for two reasons. Screen readers can read the links on a page, and then the person can choose which link they want to go to. So a screen reader would bring up a page such as this one, and it would read the links. It could say, here are the links, website, 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 website. And then the person would have to decide which one to go to, which of course they couldn't because they haven't been provided enough information in those text links to be able to do that. But of course, this is something that matters for people who are interacting visually with the page as well. The links are blue because they're meant to stand out. They're meant to be noticed by the eye, caught by the eye. So if a person is scanning through the page, they see those blue links, or visually scanning through the page, they see the blue links stand out. So in this case, they see the word website standing out, but nothing else. So that ability for the link to catch someone's attention is not helped by the fact that the link doesn't actually provide all the information that person needs. So back to our bad example of the register now links. How could we improve these? Well, one way to do it would be like this. The three links would be register for March 10, register for April 9, register for June 12th. Now these are good because now I know that the link is to register for something, and I know it's to register for the March 10th event and not for some other event. Now, of course, this assumes some amount of context. If we're on the MBA website and we're on the information sessions page on that website, we know that we're registering for information sessions for the MBA program. If we didn't have all that context, it might be necessary to say, register for the March 10 registration session. So another way of doing this would be to switch it around to have the dates first. So that would be something like March 10 registration, April 9 registration, June 12 registration. This is actually maybe better because we're front-loading the dates. In this case, if you were to take the first example, we have register for March 10, register for April 9. So register is repeated down the left side of the page. And for people who are interacting visually, their eye will scan down the left side of the page. So if something is different on the left side, they'll be able to catch it faster. So actually having the dates first might be better in a way, but really either of these would be just fine. Of course, the classic bad example for a text link is using the words click here. So this first example says click here to buy tickets, and the word here is linked. The second one says click here to purchase tickets, and click here is linked. The last one says if you want to purchase tickets for the show, click here, and then the word here is linked. Now these can be easily cleared up by simply having a text link that says buy tickets. And so can you see how much clearer that is? It's not only is it shorter, but it's actually much clearer. You don't have to read any words around it. The blue text is the text that's standing out, and it gives you all the information you need in a clear and succinct way. Better for everyone. This is a screenshot of a page on our website that just has a couple of text links within the paragraphs of the text. One of them says tuition and fees. The other says student financial services. And I just point this out because this is a good example of good text links. No superfluous text that's there. It doesn't say something like, for information on tuition and fees, click here, with the word here linked. That would be bad. So these are a good example good text links. Links should also almost never open in a new tab or window. The important thing is that on your website, you don't force links to open in a new tab or window. Right now, it's something that you would have to do kind of in the code. So don't do that. And then if you're given an option to open something in a new tab or window, simply don't select that option. I just want to be absolutely clear that this is an option you have to opt into, not something that's done automatically. So don't worry about this in your day-to-day editing, but be aware that it's not something you should actively do, that you should take that extra step to open something in a new tab or window, or have links open in a new tab. Doing this can cause accessibility issues. It also restricts personal choice because anyone can choose to open links in new tabs if they would prefer, but we don't want to force that to happen. As a side note, sometimes downloads will do this. You might have noticed that on your browser, if you were to click on a file and it might open a new tab and download the file and then close that new tab. Some browsers do that differently. Don't worry about that if your website is doing that with documents. That's probably just the behavior of the browser. It's probably not something that you're doing. But of course, if you have a question, you can always ask the marketing office to make sure nothing's going wrong. But that's a common thing that you'll run into, and that's okay. So this is an example of how this can affect accessibility. This is a screenshot of a video that's showing a demonstration of a screen magnifier software. In this case, it's from Dolphin Assistive Technology. So on the screen on this laptop that's pictured, we only see portions of 3 or 4 words on the screen because the page is highly magnified. So what would normally take up only a small portion of the screen is actually taking up the whole screen. So if someone were using this kind of technology to interact with the page, to read the page, they found a link, they clicked on the link, and the page refreshed and went to a new page, and then they realized this is not what they're looking for, they want to go back. If they were clicking the back button, it wouldn't take them back, because if it opened in a new tab, you can't use the back button anymore. So then that person would have to take their magnifier and move it up to the top of the screen and look at the tabs that are open, close the tab that they're in, and then especially if they have multiple tabs, this could be really confusing because then they would have to find the tab that they were on before. So this is one example of how opening something in a new tab or window could really cause an accessibility problem for people that are interacting with the web page. So one thing to mention, though, is that there are times when it's appropriate. And actually, the only time when it's appropriate is when opening a new page in the same window would be more disruptive to the user experience. An example of that is sometimes with online secure forms, you can't leave the form and go back to the form. So if there's a link within the form, it'll open up kind of in a little pop-up window that you can close, but you're still staying on the same page. That's an example of where this is appropriate, because otherwise the user would be brought to another page. Then when they click back to go continue the form, they would get an error message saying that they have to log back in and start over again. So if you have a question, if you have a situation where you think that opening something in a new tab or window would be appropriate, please contact the marketing office with any questions about that. Now on to images. All images should have meaningful alt text. Alternative text is the long form of that, alt text for short. In the WordPress editor, this is how you would edit those. This is the media uploader area, and if you have an image selected over on the right, there's an attachment details area that shows some details for that image, and within there is a field that's labeled alt text. That's where you would put the alt text. If you have an image that's already embedded on a page, you just go to that page, you click on the image, then you click on the edit icon, and that takes you to the image details screen. And here it's labeled as alternative text, the second field from the top. That's where you would change the alt text for the image. So what makes for good alternative text? First, proper nouns. If it's a picture of a person, put the name of that person, especially if the person is meant to be identified. If it's a faculty page and it's that faculty member's photo, put the name of the faculty member. If it's a name of or if it's a particular group of people, put the name of the group. So if it's Ergo students, 2016 Ergo students, or whatever. If it's an identifiable group, just have the name of the group. You don't have to identify every person in it necessarily. If it's a place, just put the name of the place. So it could be Augsburg College campus, or Christensen Center, if it's a building, or whatever it might be. It could also be a thing. I mean, it could be, let's say, a piece of artwork, and so that artwork has a name. It also has an artist. You might want to put those two things both in the alt text. Otherwise, simple descriptions are good. If it's not something that that should be identified by a proper noun, you could say something like student walking on campus, and that would be sufficient, what we might call a simple description of the image. If there's text present in the image, that should be accounted for in the alt text, and we'll get to more on that in a second. Also, avoid linking images, and the reason for that is if you have an image that's linked, then the alt text becomes linked text, and it has to follow all those rules that we talked about with linked text. Most of the time, you're not going to need your images to be linked, and probably the only situation where you would is if you have maybe a group photo that you want someone to be able to click on and view the full-size photo. That's okay. You just have to be even then more mindful of what the alt text is. This is just showing how to unlink an image. So here's the image details for this image that was embedded on the page, and in the display settings there's a link to field which is set to none. If you're using the media uploader area, before you insert the image into the page, there's an attachment display settings area, and one of the fields there says link to. Just make sure that's set to none, and your image won't be linked. It's important that our website uses real text and not images of text. Images of text cannot be used as a substitute for real text. So it's best to just avoid using them at all. Now, it's okay to have an image that includes text, and if that's the case, then that text just needs to be part of the image's alt text. But here is an example of where an image is being used as a substitute for text. This is on the Minnesota Urban Debate League site, and it's a page about the Great Surveillance Debate. So there's this graphic that's been made. It's an orange and black graphic. Has a lot of text on it, has all the details about the debate, the date, the time, the location, the address, the sponsors, a lot of text. And not all of this text is accounted for in the actual text of the page. A lot of it is just available within this image. And that's really bad because that means that text is not available to screen readers or other assistive technologies that can read the text or resize the text or whatever. And we'll get to more on why that's a problem in a second. But here's an example of a page that's okay in terms of its use of images or text in an image. There's an image that has the words "it pays to be an Augie" on it. And if we go to the details of that image, this shows that the alt text says "it pays to be an Augie." So that text that's within the image is accounted for in the alt text, which means it's now accessible. It has everything it needs. But notice that it's somewhat decorative. It's not used to convey information like this Great Surveillance Debate image is, where if you didn't have access to the image and the text in the image, you might not have the details such as where is the event, what time is the event, and that's a problem. So do not use images of text instead of real text. Finally, informative graphics, such as charts and graphs, must present the same information in a text-only form. What that means is if you have a visual representation of something, that representation needs to be available in text or perhaps even with an audio description, but ideally a text-only form. So here's a chart. This is a chart from the MAL program. And I don't know what kind of chart it is. I'm not a chart expert, but at the top we have the word leadership, and there are 3 branches below that. And those branch out to sense of vision, orientation toward action, and facility for persuasion. And then under sense of vision, there are 2 branches. One is ethical, and the other is creative. And then those have a bulleted list of things below each of those. So you can see, even as I'm describing it, if you can't see the graphic, there's actually a lot of explanation that has to go on because the graphic is trying to convey something visually. but that needs to be accounted for in a way that can be accessed by people who cannot visually access the image. One way to do that is to simply describe it in text, to say, here's what this chart is trying to convey. Another way to do it would be what I was doing just now, which is explaining it and having maybe an audio track that you could put below that graphic to say, here's the audio description of this image. Back to the surveillance debate image. As I've said before, doing things the right way on the web is not just about certain assistive technologies. It's for everyone. And a really common thing that people do when they're browsing web pages now is browsing those pages on their phone. A lot of our web traffic comes from phones. So phones are a particular issue because it's a very small screen, and so the content has to work on that small screen. Here's an example of what that page looks like on a mobile device. That image is now so small that the text on it is too small to even be usable. Whereas if this were real text on the page, the text would be sized appropriately. It would be perfectly readable on a phone. All right, finally, video and audio. We'll talk about video-only issues, followed by audio-only issues, and then synchronized media, which is where we have video and audio together. So for video-only tracks, these are going to require either a descriptive audio track or a text description with timestamps. This is an example of an example that's on the web page. This is a time-lapse video on the Hagfors Center site, and it's a time-lapse video of the early stages of the construction on the Hagfors Center. Below, and this video is just video. There's no audio on it, just images. Below the video is this text description of what's happening in the video. And it says, at 22 seconds in the time-lapse video, the initial construction of the lower crane is visible on the north side. At 46 seconds into the time-lapse video, the first section of the foundation wall appears, which runs mostly in an east-west direction. So it's this description of what's going on in the video, and there are timestamps so that you can get an idea of what's happening when. You could also do this as an audio track. You could have an audio description that's going along with the visuals, and that would be fine too. But at a minimum, there should be a text description like this. For anything that's audio only, we'll talk about pre-recorded audio. If you have spoken word audio content, it must have a text transcript, and there are resources as far as like how to make a good transcript that we can make available to you and that you can find on the web. It's important to identify who's speaking and that sort of thing. If there's any other audio content, it has to have some kind of text alternative. So that might be a text description of what's going on in the audio. The point is you have to take that audio and turn it into text in a way that gives someone who's reading it an equivalent experience to someone who's listening to it. As far as live audio, there's currently no standards for that in terms of captioning or text descriptions for live video, but we really don't have any live video on the website currently. Anything that's pre-recorded, though, must have these transcripts available. Now on to synchronized media. Synchronized media is where you have audio and video together. This is probably what you commonly think of as videos, since most videos do have audio. Synchronized media will require text captions. Those videos will require text captions, and they might require audio descriptions. The thing to keep in mind with video and audio, when they're put together, is to create an equivalent audio-only or video-only experience. If someone is seeing the video but not hearing it, are they getting the equivalent information? If someone is listening to the video but not seeing it, are they getting equivalent information? First, let's talk about captions. All videos that contain audio must be captioned. Captions should indicate who is speaking when the visuals do not make that obvious. For example, if the camera is on a person and their mouth is moving and they're talking, then the viewer would determine that that's the person who's speaking those words. But if it's ever not obvious, make sure that the captions indicate that, especially if there's more than one person in the video, and especially if they're not being seen. It's important to note who's speaking. Relevant sounds should be also included in the captions. So if there's jazz music playing in the background, you can say jazz music. If someone snaps their fingers, you could say snaps fingers. It's important to say things like, if a person laughs, you could put laughs in brackets. And that can be important because, remember, again, if someone is seeing it and not hearing it, and they see a person say something and then open their mouth for a while and then go back to speaking, you might be able to tell visually that the person is happy and so they're probably laughing. But if there's no audio there, the person could be screaming and you wouldn't know because if there's no description of the audio, then the auditory clue is missing. So just include things that are happening in the audio in the captions. Test your captions by watching the video with the audio muted. And then ask yourself, what did you miss? Were there any moments that were confusing? Was it ever unclear who was speaking? Doing that can really help you improve your captions to give the best visual experience for people who are not hearing the video. Now to audio descriptions. This is a quote from the American Council of the Blind. The purpose of audio description is to give people who are blind or have impaired vision a more complete picture of what is being shown, enabling them to appreciate and to share in the presentation as fully as a sighted person. Now this is key. The idea of these videos is to make sure that a person who is blind or has impaired vision is able to share in that presentation as fully as a sighted person. Typically, an audio description track, when it's separate, requires a second version of the video. So you have one version that's the regular version, another version that has the audio description track. That's really common. Audio description tracks are required when necessary, but with proper planning, you can often avoid the need for audio description tracks, especially for the kinds of videos that the college generally produces. So first, any on-screen text must also be in the audio. This is a screenshot of a video that the college has produced, and the text on the screen says SAM 16, Portland, Oregon, Communication Studies. Now, if this text is not present in the audio, it needs to be added. One way to do this is information about a person who's being interviewed in this video. So if the person being interviewed says, "Hi, my name is Sam, Augsburg, class of 2016. I'm from Portland, Oregon, majoring in communication studies." Now that information has been accounted for by the speaker. So with proper planning, a lot of these needs for audio descriptions can be avoided if proper planning goes into the production and the filming. Next, if you have charts, diagrams, or PowerPoint slides, these do not need an audio description track as long as the speaker presents the information in a way that does not depend on those visual aids. For example, if the speaker says everything that's on the PowerPoint, there's no need to add those in an audio description track. If there's a chart and the speaker explains what the chart shows, then that's been accounted for in the audio, and that's fine. This is a screenshot of a video from one of our focused conversations with the Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity group. And this is just to show that this is a typical PowerPoint slide that has a lot of text on it. And as long as the speaker is covering all of this text in their presentation, there does not need to be additional audio description tracks added. Finally, any on-screen imagery or action must be described if it is not already reflected clearly in the audio. An example of that might be if a door closes, and in the audio you can hear the door closing, then it's not necessary to add an audio description that says door closes, because the audio kind of makes that apparent. So with proper planning, you can avoid the need for audio description tracks in talking head videos, which is the example on the left, just a person sitting sort of talking next to the camera. Also videos of lectures. And so this is a screenshot of President Pribenow speaking at the chapel behind a podium. With these sorts of videos, often you don't need to add an audio description track as long as, again, proper planning goes into those videos. So test your need for audio descriptions by listening to the video without watching it. And ask yourself, what did you miss? Were any moments confusing? Think of your video as a radio program and listen to it, and then ask if someone listened to this on the radio, would they have an equivalent experience to the video? And if not, see if you can add those elements in to make that experience more equivalent. If you do have an audio description track for your video, make sure that you provide an audio description version of the video as a link. So this is a screenshot of a video that's on our website, and right below the video there's a link that says watch the video in the city with audio description. And so that's a link that someone can click to go to that video. Make sure that if there's an audio description version, the link is provided. So that ends the accessibility training. If you have questions, please contact the marketing office. Thanks for your attention.